We are not poor because we lack money, but because we lack clarity in how we live. A plumber, an anonymous self-made millionaire, once said that. If you've ever believed that wealth is an inevitable outcome of a high education, a prestigious job, or a string of clever investment decisions, this book might leave you bewildered. It doesn't talk about tech billionaires, it doesn't recount explosive IPOs, and it certainly doesn't inspire you with platitudes like "dream big and money will follow." Instead, it plunges you into the world of people we often overlook in our daily lives. The auto shop owner, the HVAC technician, the small business owner supplying gloves to construction workers. They live modestly, spend quietly, and dislike ostentation. And then, at some point, you realize they've accumulated millions of dollars not by gambling, but by treading a path no one bothered to crowd. So what's their secret? What makes them, in their silence and absence from the spotlight, models of sustainable wealth accumulation? While so many with higher degrees and better positions live in a spiral of debt or disguised liabilities under the guise of success. Have you ever asked yourself, truly considered, if wealth could stem from the most mundane choices, precisely when everyone else rushes to seek the most glamorous? If you're patient enough not to demand immediate answers, but to let this book persuade you with data, with behavioral patterns, with the lifestyles of these anonymous millionaires, then perhaps you'll never look at how you earn, spend, and live with money the same way again. Read it not to change your life instantly, but to transform your understanding of what wealth truly means. Because sometimes, being rich isn't what we achieve at the end. It's what we quietly build every single day, unnoticed by anyone. Chapter 1, Meet the Millionaire Next Door. Imagine a private seminar where all the invitees were meticulously chosen: bank directors, financial advisors, representatives from asset management firms. They sat in a quiet room, sipping coffee, flipping through dense analyses filled with charts and growth forecasts. And then the door opened. The main characters of the day, the so-called millionaires next door, quietly stepped in. No one wore a Rolex, no one sported Armani suits or gleaming dress shoes. They looked like plumbers fresh off work, like building material store owners after a delivery, like the neighbor you see walking their dog every evening. And in that very moment, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Some furrowed their brows, others exchanged doubtful glances. Someone whispered, "They're millionaires?" And that precise moment etched itself into my mind like a punch of truth. Most people don't understand who true millionaires are. They confuse those who look rich with those who are truly rich. They imagine millionaires as symbols of luxury consumption, while true millionaires are the embodiment of restraint. There's a simple way to test this. Would you call someone a millionaire if he owns a large house, a fancy car, wears designer brands, but only has a few $1,000s in his savings account? Or would you call someone a millionaire if they drive a 10-year-old Toyota, wear old clothes, never boast, but possess several $1 million in net worth with no debt, and are completely financially independent? We've spent years studying people like the latter. Not celebrities, not media entrepreneurs, but quiet millionaires living in middle-class neighborhoods. People you would never think of when wealth is mentioned. Where do they live? What do they buy? What do they eat? How do they invest? How do they raise their children? These questions led us into a labyrinth of data where every path circled back to a truth so simple it felt paradoxical. To get rich, spend less than you earn, live below your means, and consistently invest in quiet obscurity. Let me tell you about a man I deeply respect. He owns an engine recycling company. He lives in a house no bigger than yours, drives an old truck, dresses simply, and almost never takes lavish vacations. Yet, he boasts a net worth of nearly $5 million, carries no debt, and donates over $100,000 annually to charities. He doesn't need anyone to know about his wealth. He only needs to know that he controls his own life. Once we asked him why he didn't buy a new car, he chuckled, "The old car still runs perfectly well. Why buy a new one? So others can think I'm rich? I don't need them to think anything." It was in that answer that I understood something profound. Truly wealthy people don't try to impress anyone. They simply strive not to worry about money for the rest of their lives. In a consumer society, you're taught that wealth is an outward display. A Louis Vuitton bag, the latest iPhone, a Maldives vacation posted with enigmatic captions. But in the real world of personal finance, wealth is what no one sees. It's your account balance, your investment portfolio, the freedom to step out of the rat race without asking anyone for permission. Once I attended a party hosted by a bank. There was a highly renowned doctor, dressed as if from a GQ magazine, driving the latest Mercedes-AMG, a Patek Philippe watch on his wrist. He was introduced as an honored guest. When I subtly inquired about his net worth, he sighed, "To be honest, I probably haven't accumulated even $500,000. My house is still mortgaged, my car is financed, my children's tuition is still on installment." He was income rich, but asset poor, a very common archetype in modern society. Meanwhile, at a nearby table, a quiet couple sat. They dressed simply, drawing no attention. He was a retired firefighter, she an elementary school teacher. Their combined lifetime income never exceeded $100,000 per year. Yet they own nearly $1 million in debt-free investments, living comfortably and peacefully. They were accumulators of wealth. They weren't on TV, nor were they invited to give speeches. But they were living a life many could only dream of reaching. From thousands of case studies, we began to see recurring patterns. A pattern not based on luck or genius, but on discipline, moderation, and strategy. And so, we devised a simple formula for you to compare yourself with the millionaire next door. Age multiplied by annual pre-tax income divided by 10 equals your expected net worth. If your net worth is twice that figure, you belong to the prodigious accumulator of wealth, PA group. If your net worth is less than half that figure, you fall into the under-accumulator of wealth, UAW group. I know some will react saying, "This formula doesn't apply to me. I live in an expensive city. I have young children. I haven't had the opportunity." And I understand that everyone has their circumstances, but I've also met people who overcome those circumstances. A single mother with an average income still managed to save and invest 20% each month. A software engineer who hadn't been promoted in 10 years still bought 2 rental properties. The problem isn't in the circumstances, it's in the mindset. The millionaires next door aren't rich because they got lucky. They're rich because they refuse to live like the majority. One thing I never forget when interacting with these millionaires is that they're not just good at making money, they're also good at defending it. In sports, people often remember the offensive players who score. But in personal finance, defense is where empires are built. They don't earn to spend, they earn for freedom. Let's take an example, a man who owns a small plumbing shop in a quiet town. His income isn't extremely high, but it's steady. He lives in a house he bought 20 years ago, does his own gardening, fixes his own roof, and every month he dedicates 25% of his income to investing in an index fund. He doesn't follow trends, isn't interested in Bitcoin, and doesn't chase meme stocks. But after 25 years, his net worth surpassed $1.2 million. When I asked him how he felt, he said, "I feel light." Not everyone understands that feeling of lightness. It's not the exhilaration of winning the lottery. It's the feeling when you can say no without fear of being fired. It's when your children go to college and you don't need to borrow money. It's when you see someone flaunting a Bali vacation and you remain calm because you don't need to go anywhere to prove anything. And you know what's interesting? It's precisely these people, those who aren't trying to prove anything to the world, who often help others the most. A stamp store owner we once interviewed, who had a net worth of over $2 million, contributed nearly 15% of his annual profits to support local schools and public libraries. No need for photos in the newspaper, no need to have his name on a classroom. Simply, I felt it was the right thing to do. These millionaires share a common trait. They are exceptionally skilled at delaying gratification. They don't buy a new car just after a raise, don't upgrade their phone because a new model came out, don't borrow to renovate their house to keep up with the neighbors. They understand that every spending decision today is a declaration about their own future, and that keeps them from being sucked into the invisible vortex that's drowning millions. A cycle where people work just to make ends meet and spend to prove their self-worth. That vortex is called competitive consumption. One of the stories that haunted me most was about a neurosurgeon who earned over $600,000 a year but lived in perpetual debt. 3 houses, 5 cars, private tuition for 3 children, and a life where everything had to be splendid. He couldn't stop because if he did, he feared people would think he had fallen behind. His net worth after 25 years in practice was less than $400,000. He wasn't accumulating wealth, he was accumulating pressure. Meanwhile, a public school custodian in Kansas whom we studied, a widow living alone, had quietly invested in Vanguard index funds for 40 years. When she passed away, it was discovered she left nearly $3 million in her investment accounts. The entire sum was transferred into a scholarship fund for underprivileged students. The press at the time called her the invisible millionaire. But for me, she was proof of one thing: wealth isn't about how much you have, it's about what you do with what you have. There's a common misconception in public perception. They think high income is a prerequisite for wealth. The truth is, high income without financial discipline is just a faster way to earn money to spend it faster. Truly wealthy people aren't those who have a lot of money. They're those who know how to keep it. And more than that, they're those who can say no to temptations that seem harmless but kill financial freedom day by day. I once asked a millionaire in Wisconsin, who lived in a modest 120 square meter home and cooked his own meals daily, why he didn't move to a larger house. He just smiled. "What for? I'm used to it here. A bigger house wouldn't help me sleep better." For people like him, wealth isn't about expanding physical space, it's about narrowing the gap between needs and satisfaction. When you think you need more to be happy, you'll always be chasing. But when you learn to feel sufficient, you truly begin to be wealthy. No need to prove it. No need to show off. Just the quiet assurance of a growing investment account and a life where you are the driver, not merely a passenger. And then I realized that most of the people we studied had another characteristic. They weren't envious, they didn't compare themselves to others. They possessed a quiet confidence, a contentment that wasn't dependent on external validation, and that is an intangible asset money cannot buy. One of the last interviews during the research phase lingered with me long afterward. It was with a retired, silver-haired man living in a humble neighborhood on the outskirts of Atlanta. He once ran a small business supplying sanitary equipment to restaurants and hotels. Nothing glamorous, never mentioned in the papers. But he was a millionaire. I asked him, "If you could go back in time, what would you do differently?" He smiled gently and said, "I wouldn't change a thing. I never worked for money. I just wanted to sleep well, live neatly, and not burden my children." It was then I realized the motivation for accumulating wealth isn't greed, but the desire to control one's life in the most peaceful way possible. The millionaires next door don't compete, they build. In a world where everything is measured by speed, they choose patience. In a society where people splurge to impress, they choose quiet accumulation. They are the ones who quietly rise without stepping on anyone. We met hundreds of such individuals, each from a different profession, a different region, a different background. Some had lost everything, some never went to college. But all shared a common thread. They didn't spend money to prove their self-worth. They knew that value isn't in what you wear on your wrist, but in how many choices you can make without begging for approval. Wealth isn't about having a lot of money. Wealth is being able to say, "I quit," without panicking. It's being able to help your parents with medical bills without scrambling for every penny. It's being able to decline a money-making opportunity if it doesn't align with your values. And on a deeper level, wealth is when you no longer let money dictate who you are. There's a concept we often bring up: hidden value. It's the value you don't see when you only look at salary slips, price tags, or credit reports. Hidden value lies in daily habits. Someone bringing a packed lunch to work instead of eating out. Someone reading investment books instead of scrolling online. Someone driving an old car, but adding to their investment account every month. These things don't make for pretty pictures, but they are the very foundation of sustainable wealth. Most self-made millionaires marry someone with similar values. If one person saves but the other spends lavishly, wealth is difficult to accumulate. In this case, marriage isn't just about affection, it's about strategic alignment in financial thinking. There's a couple I'll always remember. He was a technician, she a nurse. They never took luxurious trips, didn't use credit cards, and held quarterly family meetings to discuss spending and investments. By the time they retired, they owned over $2 million in net worth, 3 rental apartments, and a small scholarship fund named after them at a local university. They weren't financial geniuses. They were just people who consistently did the small, right things, repeated over 30 years. And that is the key. When you understand this, you start to see the world differently. You no longer feel envious when someone shows off a new car. You no longer feel deprived when your friends buy the latest iPhone and you don't. You begin to see freedom as the most beautiful form of wealth, and you start acting not for the approval of others, but for your own future. I didn't write this book for you to idolize these quiet millionaires. I wrote it for you to see that this path is open to everyone. No luck needed, no genius required, just the courage to be different. In a world that constantly encourages you to spend money to be liked, you choose to save for freedom. In a society that glorifies speed, you choose perseverance. It's not the easy way, but it's the most realistic way to avoid becoming a hostage to money. True wealth isn't found in people who appear in the headlines, but in those you'd never guess. Because they don't want you to guess. They just want to live a life where they wake up unforced and sleep peacefully. And amidst all that is the powerful lightness of someone who has unlocked the secret to wealth. Chapter 2, Frugality. Frugality, pure and simple. When I was young, I thought wealth was all about income. The more you earned, the easier it was to get rich. That seemingly logical thought led me, and millions of others, astray into a labyrinth called high salary, no assets. After years of interviews, surveys, and data collection, I realized that what distinguishes a truly wealthy person from someone who thinks they're rich isn't the amount of money they make, but the gap between how much they earn and how much they spend. That gap, whether small or large, is known by a classic yet powerful name: frugality. Frugality isn't stinginess. It's not wearing old clothes until they're tattered, nor is it refusing all pleasures. Frugality is the art of living below your actual financial means, an art that modern society distorts, criticizes, and lulls to sleep. You won't find any social media posts telling you to live below your income or to save 50% of your salary each month. No one becomes famous for being frugal. There are no trending videos showing people driving old cars, cooking at home, and steadily investing in index funds. Because frugality doesn't bask in the spotlight. Yet, it is the very foundation of the sustainable wealth that everyone yearns for. We once surveyed thousands of millionaires, asking them what was most important in their journey of wealth accumulation. 75% answered, spending discipline, not smart investing, not picking the right stocks at the right time, not buying real estate in the perfect location, but consistently spending less than you earn. For many consecutive years, I met a laundromat owner in Minnesota. He didn't go to college, starting with an old washing machine and a few $100s borrowed. For 30 years, he worked tirelessly. No parties, no dining out, no lavish vacations. But by age 60, he had nearly $4 million in his investment portfolio and owned 3 stores. I asked him if he felt he had sacrificed too much. He replied, "When I was young, I knew if I didn't work hard, I'd grow old with worries. Now I'm growing old with freedom." In contrast, I once interviewed a marketing director earning over $30,000 a year. Every month, he flew business class, dined at Michelin-starred restaurants, and bought designer clothes seasonally. His investment account was almost zero. He admitted, "I don't know where my money goes, but it just disappears." That's not rare, that's common. Frugality doesn't stem from poverty. Frugality comes from understanding that spending is a financial decision, not an emotional reward. You don't need to relieve stress by buying another item you don't need. You don't need to upgrade your phone just because everyone else has. You need to learn to stand outside the comparison trap, where people spend money to compensate for their insecurities. We call those who excel at saving prodigious accumulators of wealth. Pause. They never live beyond their financial means. They track every small expense. They invest instead of spending. They never say, "I deserve it," because they know the cost of deserving it today is dependence on money tomorrow. Let me tell you about a couple I deeply respect. He was a high school teacher, she a nurse. Their combined income never exceeded $10,000 per year, yet they lived frugally down to every detail, buying used cars, eating dinner at home, choosing nearby vacation spots, and consistently investing in their retirement fund. When I first met them, they had accumulated over $1.5 million. No one believed they were millionaires, not even their neighbors, and they didn't care. You know what's wonderful? Frugality doesn't require genius, nor does it require luck. You just need to know how to say no to small temptations. You just need to understand that every time you spend money, you're handing control of your life over to something outside of yourself. One of the statistics that astonished me was that among the millionaires we studied, over 80% had never bought a watch costing more than $300, over 70% did not own a brand new car, and 60% lived in homes built before 1980. They didn't need to upgrade their outward appearance, they upgraded their inner freedom. And this frugality isn't a sacrifice, it's a strategy. They understand that spending doesn't bring lasting happiness, but saving brings choices. You might not believe it, but you don't need much if you know when enough is enough. There are millionaires whose annual shopping list only includes promotional toothpaste, a new set of clothes during a sale, one tire change, and a few books borrowed from the public library. And they still live happily, travel, and enjoy good wine. They just never pay more than necessary for those things. We call such individuals strategic consumers. They aren't swayed by brands, nor are they led by trends. They understand that someone who buys a $150 shirt doesn't necessarily look better than someone who buys a $25 shirt. The former has simply bought an extra illusion. Don't misunderstand, the millionaires next door aren't living ascetic lives, they also enjoy themselves. But they clearly distinguish between consumption that creates long-term value and consumption solely for ego gratification. They understand that every dollar spent must return something greater: freedom, time, or the ability to invest in the future. A vivid example is the story of a sandwich shop owner in Texas. He once told me, "Every time I think about buying a new car, I imagine it eating into the dividends I could receive over the next 10 years. Then I realize my old car is perfectly fine." Frugality doesn't kill the joy of living, it helps you extend it. You can drink coffee at home every morning instead of Starbucks. You can learn to fix a leaky faucet instead of calling a plumber every time it drips. You can read free books instead of buying ones just to line your shelves. And you can live like a millionaire without anyone knowing it. But here's the most interesting part. Frugality isn't just a behavior, it's a psychology. We realize that frugal people share a common trait: independent thinking. They aren't influenced by how others live. They don't spend money out of fear of judgment. They don't acquire possessions to maintain an image. They live by their own standards, not those dictated by advertisements, social media, or neighbors. In an era where people post every meal, every pair of shoes, every trip online to garner likes, frugality becomes a revolutionary act. You dare to stand outside the game, you don't need anyone to confirm you're doing well. You just need to know you're on the right path, even if no one is applauding. And then you start to notice something strange: you worry less, you feel less pressured. You begin to appreciate the little things again. A home-cooked meal, a quiet evening with a book, a day off without thinking about bills. We once conducted a small survey, asking hundreds of millionaires about their financial stress index. The result: over 90% reported rarely feeling anxious about money. That's a figure high-income, lavish spenders never achieve. Why? Because truly wealthy people don't use money to prove anything. They use money to buy peace of mind. And peace of mind isn't found in stores, nor in a black credit card, it's found in your daily habits. I still remember a quote from a woman we interviewed. She was a retired accountant, living alone, with a net worth of nearly $2 million. People said I lived a boring life, but I found joy in it. I preferred watching my money grow to seeing it disappear after every sale season. People like her don't make headlines, they aren't flashy, but they are the quiet pillars of the real economy: people who don't borrow to buy happiness, but accumulate to protect it. You want to know who will weather an economic recession calmly? Not the highest earners, but those who consume the least yet invest the most. Those who clearly understand what they need and eliminate what they don't. Frugality isn't something you do once and then stop. It's a lifestyle. And like any lifestyle, it demands belief. Belief that you don't need to own to enjoy. Belief that $1 saved today can become $10 tomorrow. Belief that your worth isn't dependent on the clothes you wear, the car you drive, or where you dine. We tracked millionaires over time and found that the wealthy didn't get rich from one brilliant decision. They got rich through a long series of consistently wise choices, repeated anonymously. Every time they chose not to upgrade their phone, they bought more investment time. Every time they declined an invitation to a lavish dinner, they retained a piece of financial independence. Every time they drove their car for another year before getting a new one, they fortified the foundation for their children's future. And then, as years passed, people called them lucky, called them shrewd investors, called them financial wizards. But you know what I admire most about them? They never waited until they earned more to start saving. They saved even when they had the least. They didn't think, when I get a raise, I'll start taking money seriously. They took it seriously from day one because they understood. If you can't save when you earn $10, you won't be able to when you earn 100. They didn't wait for favorable circumstances, they created them. I still vividly remember a conversation with a man whom everyone would consider average. He was an HVAC repair technician with a modest income, living in an old house, growing his own vegetables in the backyard. When I asked him if he ever felt disadvantaged by living so frugally, he said, "I've never felt disadvantaged. I just think of it as playing a long game of chess. I want to be the one left standing when everyone else gives up halfway." He played that game for over 30 years and won. I also met people who earned a lot of money, but always felt they didn't have enough. They spent to feel like they were living right, but they didn't realize they were spending away their own security. A luxury car can't hide the pressure of debt. A 5-star vacation won't make retirement worries disappear. A large house won't save a marriage shattered by money arguments. Frugality doesn't shield you from all of life's risks, but it helps you face risks with a cushion. You don't have to make decisions out of fear. You don't have to nod in agreement due to a lack of options. And above all, frugality teaches you a lesson greater than money itself: self-mastery. In a society where everything advertising, friends, culture pushes you to spend, saying no becomes a profound act. You don't just keep your money, you keep your right to choose. The millionaire next door chooses less today to have more tomorrow. No one applauds them. They have no titles, no bank directors call them VIPs, but they have freedom, and that is worth more than any paycheck. I once asked an elderly millionaire what was the best spending decision of his life. He answered without hesitation, "The times I didn't asterisk spend." That statement, to me, encapsulated this entire chapter. Frugality isn't a temporary behavior, it's a life philosophy in a chaotic world. When you are frugal, you slow down but go further. You don't win every battle, you win the entire war. And you don't have to start as a millionaire. You just need to start as someone who understands that wealth doesn't come from spending more, but from spending smarter. Be that person. Be the one who can smile watching their investment account grow, knowing their children won't be burdened by debt, and realizing you achieved all of this thanks to two simple yet profound words: frugality. Asterisk Chapter 3: Time, Effort, and Money. On a bitter cold March afternoon in Boston, I sat in a small coffee shop with a man in his 50s. He wore an old jacket, his face weathered by the sun, his hands calloused as if he'd just left a mechanic's workshop. He was a millionaire, but no one else in the cafe knew it except me. I asked, "What do you think is most important for becoming wealthy?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he lifted his coffee cup, blew gently, and then replied slowly, "Time. That is the most valuable asset in my life, and I've used it more wisely than most people I've met." His answer left me speechless. We often think of money as the first thing to accumulate, but in truth, time is the primordial currency. You exchange time for skills, skills for income, and then you use income to buy back time if you know how. The paradox is that most of us spend all our time earning money, then use that money to buy things that consume the rest of our lives. This chapter is about the 3 pillars that every self-made millionaire embodies: time, effort, and money. No sustainable wealth is built on just one of these elements, while neglecting the other 2. Let's start with time. The millionaires next door don't view time as an endless resource. They see it as investment capital, and they despise wasting capital. We asked hundreds of millionaires about how they spent their time. Most answers revolved around things that would never make it onto Instagram: budgeting, financial research, reading books, learning skills, managing investment portfolios. They don't kill time, they transform time. They understand that an hour spent learning about index funds can save thousands of dollars later. An hour spent financial planning can help avoid debt for years. They grasp that time shouldn't be spent like loose change, but allocated like a rare asset. Next is effort. Truly wealthy people often work harder than you'd imagine, but they don't work themselves to exhaustion. they selectively apply their effort. They don't do many things, they do the right asterisk things. They aren't busy by habit, they're busy by strategy. Consider an auto shop owner we once studied. He never opened on Sundays. He didn't take walk-in customers during lunchtime. He used that time to read market reports, update on technology trends, and teach his son how to manage cash flow. People called him difficult. I called him focused. The millionaires next door don't spread their effort thin everywhere. They concentrate their energy where it generates long-term returns. Sometimes that means fixing their own roof. Sometimes it means spending hours in the evening learning about ETFs or compound interest. They understand that if they don't invest effort to control money, money will control them. And finally, there's money itself. It sounds obvious, but let me be clear. Not everyone who has money knows how to use it. Truly wealthy people know how to make money work, not just for profit, but to reduce mental burdens. We once asked, "Why do you save so much when you could spend freely?" A widowed librarian replied, "I don't save out of fear. I save asterisk not asterisk to be afraid." That simple, gentle statement encapsulates the entire philosophy of money for the truly wealthy. They don't let money control their emotions, they use money to regulate their emotions. Do you know the feeling of sleepless nights due to financial worries? They don't, because they exchange their time and effort very early on to never have to live with that feeling. They invest money not just in stocks or real estate, but in knowledge, skills, health, freedom of choice, and lasting relationships. They don't use money to prove status. They use it to build a foundation for a life not dictated by foreseeable risks. I once met a couple whose lives were a vivid illustration of the three pillars: time, effort, and money. He was an electrical technician working for an elevator maintenance company. She was a preschool teacher. Their combined income never exceeded $90,000 a year. But after more than 30 years of simple living, saving, and consistent investing, they had over $2 million in debt-free net worth and owned 2 rental apartments generating stable income. But what was truly remarkable wasn't the numbers, but how they utilized every unit of time in their day to build those numbers. He woke up at 5:00 a.m. to read financial reports, not because he loved investing, but because he considered it part of his responsibility. She recorded every single expense in a notebook since 1993, even the money spent on pens for students. They never let time drift aimlessly. Every hour, every minute held meaning either to create value or to protect value. They never bought lottery tickets, never took on credit card debt, never upgraded their lifestyle just because their income increased. Whenever they got a raise, they increased their savings, not their spending. For every vacation, they chose less crowded, less advertised places, prioritizing time together to them. That asterisk was wealth. If you could go back to being 30, what would you do differently? He pondered for a few seconds, then said, "I would learn to control my effort earlier." For a while, I worked too much without a strategy. I thought just working hard would make me rich, but that's not it. That was a profound lesson. We live in a generation obsessed with productivity. Do more, faster, with higher intensity. But doing a lot without direction only exhausts you. It doesn't make you rich. The millionaires next door understand this. They aren't busy due to pressure, they're busy with purpose. They don't chase every opportunity, they select and optimize. They work like patient gardeners, steadily, knowing exactly what to do today for fruit next year. You might see them cleaning their garage on a weekend, or spending an entire evening learning how to install expense tracking software, or dedicating a month to analyze whether to buy the house next door as a rental property. Few people boast about such tasks, but that is strategic effort, something most people overlook. And when you invest effort wisely, you'll witness an astonishing phenomenon. Money starts to multiply itself. Not by magic, but by simple rules. You control your time and effort. You control your behavior. You control your behavior. You control your money. We call this the healthy financial cycle. Use time to learn, use effort to do, use money to invest, then return to use time more effectively. With each cycle, your assets grow, anxiety diminishes, and you become wealthy in the most sustainable way, rich in choices. Imagine you could work not because you needed money, but because you wanted to contribute. You could take 3 months off to care for a loved one without falling into crisis. You could refuse a toxic job without worrying about your next meal. That is the kind of wealth no logo on your shirt can buy. Many people ask me, so when is it enough? The answer isn't in a number, it's in this question. Have you used your time, effort, and money to build the life you desire? If not, the number doesn't matter. I sat with a retired aerospace engineer who retired early at 50. He had accumulated over $3 million in net worth with only an above-average income throughout his working life. I asked him if he had a secret. He squinted and smiled. I only did one thing. I viewed every minute of my life as precious capital, and I refused to let it be wasted. I pondered that statement for a long time and realized that it is the root mindset of truly wealthy people. They don't see money as the destination. They see time as the core, effort as the fuel, and money as merely the consequence. They don't desperately try to get rich. They build a system that ensures they never have to fear poverty. Throughout my research journey, one story always moved me, that of a man named Jay who owned a small auto repair shop in rural Maine. Jay never went to college. He worked 6 days a week, personally changing oil, sweeping floors, and fixing every bolt. But every evening, he spent an hour reading the financial reports of publicly listed companies. He said, "I wanted to understand where my money was going." He started investing at 30, a few $100s each month, and never missed a single month, even when his wife was seriously ill or his shop caught fire. When I met him, he was 65, living in a small but cozy home, and owned over $2.5 million in index funds and rental properties. I asked, "Do you have any regrets?" He paused for a moment, then shook his head. "No, I think I lived rightly. I have nothing to show off, but I also don't need to ask anyone for anything." And that is the freedom that the 3 pillars: time, effort, and money, when invested correctly, will bring. Many people think being rich means you can spend without thinking. But I believe being rich is when you no longer have to trade what's most precious: time with your children, effort to please others, and money to buy things you don't truly need. Wealth doesn't come from toiling tirelessly and then spending for gratification. Wealth comes from knowing how to choose the right battles, at the right time, and not destroying yourself for fleeting rewards. You might not be good at math, haven't studied finance, or started investing early. But if you start today controlling your time, dedicating your effort to what's important, and spending money strategically, you'll see that the wealth you build isn't just a number. It's a silent, enduring form of freedom. It's a kind of wealth that doesn't appear on the stock market, that no one can measure. But you will feel it every morning when you wake up without an alarm, every time you face a choice without fear. Every time you know you are living the life you chose, not the life others expect. You can start anywhere. You just need to pause for a moment and look at your life like a balance sheet. What are you dedicating your time to? Is your effort being wasted? Who is your money serving? The answers to those 3 questions will show you whether you're getting richer or poorer, and believe me, if you start answering honestly, the journey of change has already begun. Asterisk Chapter 4. The car doesn't make the man asterisk. A gleaming Rolls-Royce pulled up to the entrance of a 5-star hotel. The driver, in a dark suit and white gloves, opened the door with a movement so precise it seemed mechanical. From inside stepped a middle-aged man, impeccably groomed, in a custom-tailored suit and polished leather shoes. All eyes followed him, as if his presence was vivid proof of what society implicitly agreed upon. That, indeed, was a rich man. There was just one problem: he wasn't a millionaire. Meanwhile, in another small town, a different man, wearing jeans and old sneakers, driving a 10-year-old Toyota Camry, was stepping out of his car, heading into a bank to transfer funds into an index fund. He had no chauffeur, no one looked up as he walked past. But his net worth exceeded $5 million, and no one knew that except his personal financial advisor and me. And that's precisely the problem: the car doesn't make the man. In modern society, where image is often used in place of reality, people automatically equate one's mode of transportation with their financial status. If you drive an expensive car, you're rich. If you drive an old car, you're not successful. And that is a fatal mistake that traps millions in a consumption spiral, merely to look rich. We studied thousands of self-made millionaires, and the results were completely contrary to societal preconceptions. The vast majority of millionaires, especially those truly wealthy in net worth, do not drive luxury cars. They don't own the expensive vehicles you might imagine. Instead, they drive Toyotas, Hondas, Fords, Chevrolets everyday, durable, easy to maintain, slow depreciating brands. Many don't even buy new cars, they buy used ones. The reason is simple: They don't view cars as status symbols, but merely as tools for transportation. Let me share some numbers that might astonish you. In a recent survey of over 1,000 self-made millionaires, only 23.5% had ever purchased a luxury car in their lives. 81% had never bought a brand new car immediately after its release. 37% opted for used cars that were 3 years old or more. Over 50% drove the same car for more than 5 years before even considering a replacement. You might be surprised, even perplexed. But that's the truth. The wealthy don't spend money on vehicles to impress, they impress with financial stability. I once interviewed a man who owned 6 rental properties and a stock portfolio worth over $2 million. He still drove a 2006 Nissan Altima. When I asked why he didn't upgrade, he smiled. Because it still runs well, and buying a new car wouldn't make me smarter, nor would it increase my assets. It's precisely that mindset that separates them from the crowd. Most people spend money on cars for social reasons, not economic ones. They want to be seen, admired, and perceived as successful. But the millionaires next door don't need that. They don't need their car to speak for them, because their financial balance sheet already does, even if no one sees it. There's a man I can't forget, the owner of a chain of building material stores in the American Midwest. He had over $10 million in net worth, but for more than 10 years, he only drove a scratched-up Ford pickup. When I asked him, he simply said, "I like this truck and it gets the job done. That's enough." He wasn't seeking external validation, he was seeking internal efficiency. There's a part of the data that truly astonished me. Many millionaires didn't know and didn't care what brand of car others drove. This completely contradicted the mindset of the majority of today's middle class, who are willing to borrow money to own a vehicle that speaks to their status. For truly wealthy individuals, a car is merely a means of transportation, not a tool for personal identification. They don't need a luxury car to confidently walk into a boardroom, because they are the ones signing the transfer orders. They don't need the roar of an engine when stopped at a red light, because their investment portfolio is steadily growing in silence. In our research, there was a very simple yet provocative question. If you were given a Rolls-Royce, what would you do? The result: nearly 87% of millionaires answered that they would sell it immediately and use the money to invest, pay off their mortgage, or contribute to their children's or grandchildren's scholarship funds. One man answered very bluntly, "I don't have space to park a car like that, and I have no desire to be the target of curious stares every time I go out." That is the subtle difference. The millionaires next door avoid attention. They don't need anyone to know they're rich, they just need to control their personal finances. Imagine this scene. A man walks into a public parking lot, driving a 10-year-old car. People walk past without a second glance. Yet his retirement account is substantial enough for him to retire tomorrow, live for another 30 years without working, and still support his family and donate to the community. Meanwhile, the person parked next to him, driving a flashy red sports car and posting stories daily, is quietly paying off debt at 6.9% interest each month and worrying about every maintenance cost. You see, the car doesn't make the man, but it can reveal the driver's financial mindset. We also discovered a paradox. The newer people are to money, the more likely they are to buy luxury cars to reaffirm their status. Conversely, those who have built sustainable wealth over time have less need to display it. During dinners with hundreds of millionaires, I noticed they spoke very little about cars. They talked more about the market, retirement strategies, how to transfer assets to the next generation, and how to protect value against volatility. In those conversations, the car was never a main character. It was background, a utility, nothing more. One example that always stuck with me was the story of a woman in Seattle, a high-income vice president at a tech company who still drove an old, worn-out Subaru to work. When asked why she didn't upgrade, she simply smiled and said, "I have one goal, to retire by 50. Buying a new car now would mean setting that back by 2 years." For her, time was more valuable than symbolism. For many millionaires, it goes even deeper. They understand that a new car isn't just the purchase price. It means higher insurance, more expensive maintenance, faster depreciation, and worst of all, it easily binds you to a lifestyle that demands you keep up appearances. And once you step into that lifestyle, it's very hard to turn back. The car is just the starting point. Next comes the house, then the watch, then private schools for the children, 5-star resort vacations, and an entire chain of choices designed to maintain an image rather than maintain financial freedom. That is the trap of symbolic consumption, and the truly wealthy have learned to avoid it. I once met a man in his 70s living in suburban Denver. He owned a real estate portfolio worth millions and a solid investment fund, but he still drove an old Honda Civic. I asked, "Do you ever feel embarrassed driving a car like that?" He laughed and said, firm as a nail, "Never. I don't live to be admired by others. I live not to flatter anyone." His answer stunned me. Modern society teaches us how to impress, but no one teaches us how to preserve self-mastery. The car you drive is, in fact, a concise financial statement that reveals your financial thinking. If you constantly swap for new cars, continuously increase your car loans, consistently choose luxury models beyond your actual financial capacity, you are living on future spending, not current assets. In our research, nearly 70% of self-made millionaires never borrowed money to buy a car. They paid cash. If they couldn't afford to pay up front, they waited until they could. It sounds simple, but how many of us can do that in a culture where every credit application can be approved in 15 minutes? How many of us can say no to a new car when colleagues, friends, and even family members around us are changing cars like clothes? The millionaires next door can do that, not because they're immune to social pressure, but because they have a greater value to uphold: financial independence. They understand that a car merely takes you where you want to go, but financial freedom takes you where you choose to go, anytime you wish. We once recorded a conversation between two men, one driving a new BMW, the other an old pickup truck. When the BMW driver scoffed at the paint-peeling truck, the truck driver simply said, "It gets my kids to school every morning, and then I come home and read investment books all afternoon. I don't need it to be pretty, I need it to work." That's the difference. One buys to be seen, the other buys to live by his values. The more I interacted with these quiet millionaires, the clearer a simple truth became. True wealth lies in what you don't see. It doesn't appear on the dashboard. It isn't emblazoned on the metal emblem at the front of the car. It lies in how you use money not to impress, but to build a life unburdened by things you don't need. One of the women I interviewed, a self-made investor living reclusively in the suburbs, told me something profound. The car you drive says nothing about your value, it only says what you've chosen to prioritize. And indeed, every time we choose a car or any major expense, we reveal our core financial philosophy. Do we choose image or do we choose freedom? The millionaires next door choose freedom. They are not swayed by outward appearances. They know exactly who they are and what they want to achieve in 10, 20, even 30 years. They don't live in a frantic financial sprint where every decision must look impressive. They live in an accumulation cycle where a car is just a car, and real life begins after you turn off the engine, step into your home, and no one is watching. Chapter 5, Economic Outpatient Care. I once sat in a civil court financial hearing. The father, over 60, silver-haired, still impeccably dressed, had a deeply etched, weary face. His son, nearly 40, in a branded shirt, polished shoes, and the latest smartphone, stood with his head bowed. The lawsuit was over a house worth nearly $500,000. The father had bought it, put it in his son's name, paid off the entire loan, and renovated the interior. Now, the son declared the house his own and refused to let his parents live there in their old age. Outside the courtroom, I caught the father's eye. There was no longer anger, only a profound regret, as if he was thinking, "I shouldn't have helped so much." And it was from moments like these that I began to delve into a phenomenon we call economic outpatient care, a type of off-the-books financial support common in affluent families, where parents, no matter how wealthy, can become hostages to their own generosity. There's a silent paradox in the financial structure of families. The more financially wealthy parents support their adult children, the harder it is for those children to become independent, and the more easily the family's assets erode. Perhaps this sounds jarring to many. Helping children is natural, isn't it? Giving them some capital for a house, supporting college tuition, helping pay off credit card debt, isn't that a responsibility? The problem isn't with kindness. It's with the long-term consequences that few dare to confront. We conducted in-depth surveys with hundreds of millionaire families, and the results were astonishing. Millionaires who provided less financial support to their adult children had a higher ability to maintain and grow family wealth. Conversely, families with regular economic outpatient care for their children showed significantly lower rates of wealth accumulation, not just in the next generation, but even in the current one. Why? Because when children get accustomed to being provided for, they lose their financial muscle, their ability to withstand pressure, be self-reliant, and make decisions. They develop spending habits based on the expectation of help, rather than on their own true resources. Gradually, their living standards exceed their income, and out of love for their children, parents continue to pour money in. This cycle devours the assets of both generations. Let me tell you the story of a millionaire couple in Chicago. He owned an industrial equipment store, she was a pharmacist. They had 3 children. The first 2 received full support for tuition, down payments on houses, and even partial living expenses after marriage. The youngest child was different. They decided to provide only emotional support, no money. The consequence: the 2 elder children, even nearing 40, still had no positive net worth. Their dependent lifestyle prevented them from building financial competence. Meanwhile, the youngest, after a few hard years, bought his own house, ran a small business, and never borrowed from his parents. When I asked the father if he regretted it, he shook his head and replied simply, "We learned a costly lesson. The more we helped, the weaker we made our children." If you find this harsh, I understand, because the parental instinct is to protect. But you must remember that the inheritance you leave isn't just money. It's a mindset, skills, the ability to face life on your own 2 feet. In our research, there's a behavioral pattern so alarming it's repetitive. Adult children who receive regular financial assistance from their parents tend to spend more, save less, and invest worse. It's no longer anecdotal, it's data. You might think, but helping a child buy a house is reasonable, right? Yes, but the important thing isn't that you help, but how you help. The millionaires next door are very cautious about this. They don't object to offering support, but they don't do it in a way that erodes their children's personal responsibility. They transform each act of support into an agreement, a commitment, part of a larger lesson. For example, a father who owned a woodworking shop in Wisconsin agreed to pay half of his son's college tuition, but required him to work part-time to cover the rest. Simultaneously, he made his son create a personal financial plan, track his monthly expenses, and report back quarterly. The son at the time thought it was rigid, unloving, but by age 28, he owned his first home, had no credit card debt, and possessed an emergency fund equal to 6 months of living expenses. You see, helping children doesn't mean doing things asterisk for asterisk them. It means creating the context for them to learn how to do it themselves. Smart millionaires don't let love obscure financial principles. They don't upgrade their children's lives to their own standards. They let their children build their own lives. They understand that if you buy your child a house, you might save them some time. But if you let them research, borrow, pay, and fix it themselves, you're helping them accumulate things far more valuable than money: experience, self-confidence, and decision-making ability. This is why many millionaires, even if they could afford to provide for their children for life, choose to let them swim on their own. A mother who was an internist once told me, "If I paid off my daughter's student loans, she would graduate and not know how to manage her finances." I chose to let her learn to pay every dollar. That's the most long-term gift I could give her. And it's this discipline that creates a sustainable financial culture within a family. In a financially healthy family, money isn't used to soothe emotions, quell anxieties, or extinguish mistakes. Money is used as an educational tool. And parents, no matter how much they love their children, understand that self-reliance is an inheritance. Imagine this: a child grows up in a middle-class family, fully supported by their parents. Tuition is paid, cars are bought, the first apartment is largely provided for. Every time they face financial difficulty, their parents bail them out. By age 35, they still can't afford major expenses without borrowing. They live on the expectation of continuous support, like an invisible credit line from their parents. Sound familiar? It's not rare. It's a silent financial epidemic within affluent classes. We call it second-generation financial dependency, where wealth is no longer a springboard but a generational burden. And sadly, many parents don't realize this until it's too late. I once asked a millionaire, who built his fortune from scratch and lived in a modest home in northern Arizona, how much money he intended to leave his 3 children. He didn't answer immediately. He just poured another cup of coffee, sat silently for a long moment, then said, "I'll leave them enough to get a start, but not enough to quit life." That seemingly simple answer contained a wisdom that perhaps even modern financial education systems haven't taught. Inherited money, without an accompanying value system, can become a curse. In the multitude of research files we collected, children who grew up receiving economic outpatient care that is continuously provided for by their parents not only didn't know how to get rich, but often spent more than the average person. Why? Because they never truly understood the value of money. A child raised with their parents' money often learns that having money is a given, not an achievement. And when a given becomes the definition of wealth, any limitation is seen as an injustice. I once witnessed a parent spend over $15,000 on his daughter's wedding, then continued to pay off the young couple's credit card debt for 3 consecutive years, simply because they had become accustomed to that standard of living. That was no longer help. That was nurturing an illusion. Meanwhile, smart millionaires choose to design financial psychological barriers for their children early on. They don't give, they lend with conditions. They don't rescue, they demand commitment in return. They don't pass on assets, they pass on the asterisk way asterisk to protect and grow assets. They know wealth isn't transferred by will, it's transferred by mindset. Remember, a will can leave millions, but just 1 year of dependent living is enough to squander it all. There was a millionaire couple who deeply impressed me. They had 3 children. When each turned 21, they received an opportunity fund of $20,000, but it came with a contract. If they used the money to invest in education, start a business, or buy income-generating assets, the parents would match it with an additional $20,000. If they used it for consumption, parties, or buying a car, the fund ended there. All 3 children chose to invest. One opened a pet store, one pursued a master's degree, one invested in real estate. All 3 now no longer need their parents' money. That is the power of strategic limits. Economic care isn't wrong, but unconditional care for a prolonged period will erode a child's ability to take responsibility. There's an ancient Jewish proverb I deeply appreciate. Give a man a fish, and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. But if you keep throwing fish, the child will never learn to cast the line. In family finance, casting the line means knowing how to work, how to fail, how to get back up, how to manage, how to refuse, and how to delay gratification. And these are things that cannot be bought with overprotection. Every father and mother wants their children to be happy, but true happiness doesn't come from being pampered. It comes from the feeling of controlling one's own life. And the truly wealthy understand this well. They don't fear their children falling, they only fear their children never learning to stand up. And so, they let their children walk on their own, even when their own palms clench, drenched in sweat. Asterisk Chapter 6, Proactive Action. We once interviewed a middle-aged, retired engineer living in a modest 2-story house on the outskirts of Minneapolis. He didn't seem particularly special. An 11-year-old Ford Focus was parked in his driveway. His refrigerator was plastered with coupons cut from newspapers. Dinner often consisted of toast and pumpkin soup. But then we saw his investment portfolio, over $4 million, evenly distributed among stocks, bonds, index funds, and rental properties. No debt, no credit cards, independent of anyone, and notably not a single dollar came from inheritance. I asked him, "How did you do it?" He answered with a simplicity I'll never forget, "I do. I don't just think, I do." That is the core of this chapter. Throughout our research, we discovered a prominent characteristic, if not a common denominator, among self-made millionaires. They are people of action. Not impulsive action, not emotional action, but planned, repetitive, disciplined action. They don't talk too much about what they will do. They do it, they adjust, and then they do it again. And what's astonishing is that most of these actions are very mundane. They didn't invent anything groundbreaking, didn't win the lottery, didn't perfectly time Bitcoin surges. They simply did small things repeatedly for a very long time. They planned their family budget each month, tracked every expense, consistently invested 10% of their income into index funds. They repaired their homes themselves instead of hiring services. They read financial reports themselves instead of relying on experts. They didn't wait for the perfect moment, they started with what they had. Imagine this: two friends, both 30 years old, both earning $60,000 a year. The first spends almost everything, occasionally investing if there's any surplus. The second dedicates 20% of his income right from the start, puts it into an investment account, and never touches it. After 30 years, the first has a few outdated luxury items. The second has nearly $1 million in assets. This happens every day, not just in books or online, but right next to you. The problem isn't how much you earn, it's what you do with the money you have. And what distinguishes millionaires from the rest isn't knowledge, it's behavior. I once met a single woman living alone, an office worker with an average income. Every month, she dedicated one weekend day to updating her personal financial spreadsheet. No one made her do it. No one paid her for it. She just wanted to be sure she was on the right track. 18 years later, she had over $1.2 million in assets, enough to retire early, debt-free, live independently, and cover part of the college tuition for her two orphan nieces in the family. When we asked her secret, she replied, "I act before I'm ready." That's what most people don't dare to do. They wait to know more, to have more time, to be less busy, to have fewer risks. But truly wealthy people don't need perfection, they just need to start. Proactive action in their world isn't a reaction, it's proactive. They don't wait for a crisis to learn how to cut expenses. They don't wait for the market to evaporate before thinking about portfolio allocation. They don't wait for their third child to plan for retirement. They are one step ahead and act as if the future began yesterday. There's a quiet financial legend named Bill who owned an air conditioning repair shop in South Texas. He didn't read many books, didn't have a college degree, and didn't know how to use Excel. But for 40 years, he woke up at 5:00 a.m., meticulously recorded every income and expense in a notebook, and consistently invested in a single index fund. He didn't care if the market went up or down. He didn't read economic news. He just did one thing consistently without interruption. When he retired, his net worth was $3.6 million. I asked him, "Did you ever feel like you were on the wrong path?" He shrugged. "I don't know right or wrong, I just know I did it." It's this steadfastness that is truly rare. In an era where people change financial strategies like they change phone wallpapers, the truly wealthy stick to a straight line and avoid complexity. They don't need investment apps with flashing charts. They need a plan simple enough to execute and robust enough to sustain. They aren't tempted by hot markets. They don't jump into trending stocks or switch funds based on TikTok advice, because they know the most effective thing isn't the newest thing, but the thing you can consistently commit to. Proactive action isn't glamorous. It doesn't have pretty pictures to show off. It's often subtle, tedious, even boring, like cooking your own meals instead of ordering takeout, like spending 3 hours on a weekend to reconcile receipts, like reviewing your insurance policy once a year. But it's precisely these actions, unflashy, audience-free, that build an unshakable financial life. There's a story I can't forget. A couple of teachers with a combined income of just over $80,000 a year had planned for retirement since they were 33. They set specific goals, established a budget, and taught themselves to invest. 15 years later, they quit their jobs, moved into a small lakeside house, grew vegetables, read books, and funded an organization that provided free financial literacy to high school students. When we asked if they felt they had sacrificed too much, they burst into laughter. "We don't feel we sacrificed anything," they said. "People spend money to be free. We chose to accumulate to be free sooner." You see, truly wealthy people don't view wealth as luck, but as the consequence of proactive accumulation. And on a deeper level, proactive action is how they resist the chaos of the world. When markets are turbulent, they don't panic. When interest rates fluctuate, they don't rush. When everyone worries about their money losing value, they continue to invest in what they understand well and stick to the plan they set from the beginning. Because they know the world changes constantly, but core financial principles do not. And one of those principles is that you won't get rich by thinking smarter than others, but by doing better than you did yesterday. There's a peculiar trait I noticed among the truly wealthy. They don't wait for motivation, they don't need inspiration, they don't wait for the right moment. They create motivation through action, rather than acting only when motivated. This sounds simple, but is what divides the world between dreamers and accumulators. They don't say, when I earn $100,000 a year, I'll start investing. They say, I'm earning $40,000 and I'll allocate 10% today. They don't wait to be debt-free to learn financial management. They learn financial management to become debt-free. They don't wait for retirement to think about long-term goals. They live today according to a 20-year plan. And because of this, they possess something most others never will: freedom of choice. Do you know what's most terrifying? It's not poverty, it's living your entire life feeling out of control of your future. And the only way to reclaim that right is to act, today, even if you're not ready. I interviewed a 42-year-old woman, a low-wage clerical worker, divorced, raising 2 children. For years, she thought she couldn't change anything. Then one day, she read a quote on a flyer at the public library: "Act as if your life depends on it, because it does." That day, she started tracking her expenses, then learned to invest through library books, then opened an investment account, then cut her living expenses by 25%. 12 years later, she had $600,000 in assets, lived in a fully paid-off apartment, and was preparing to open a free personal finance class for single mothers. When we asked her secret, she replied, "I acted before I believed I could." That is the core of proactive action. You don't need absolute certainty, you just need to start while you still have doubts. Truly wealthy people aren't those without fear, they are those who act despite their fear. And the good news is that this action doesn't need to be grand or dramatic. You don't need to invest $10,000 to start. You just need to set aside $50 each month, consistently, without interruption. You don't need a 20-page retirement plan, you just need a simple spreadsheet and a commitment to keep it alive. There's a simple formula I learned from hundreds of millionaires: small plus consistent plus time equals miracle. It sounds bland, but that's what makes you rich. Not breakthroughs, not life-changing opportunities, but persistent, slow, unglamorous action. People ask me, how do I know if I'm on the right track? I reply, what are you doing every day? Because results aren't in desires, they're in repeated actions. And if there's one piece of advice I can give to anyone reading this book, it's this: just start. It doesn't need to be perfect, just consistent. Start with the money you have. Start with the knowledge you possess. Start with the little time you have each evening. Start with an expense tracking app. Start with a blank notebook. Then each small action will accumulate. Then you'll look back and no longer recognize yourself. Then you'll see that the only thing standing between you and wealth isn't the market, luck, or education, but action. Chapter 7, Your Niche Market. If you walk into a quiet suburban neighborhood and knock on every door, you wouldn't guess who the millionaires are. They don't wear designer brands, they don't live in mansions, they don't park expensive cars in their driveways. But if you sit down and talk to them, ask them what they do for a living, you'll start to notice something peculiar. Most of them aren't doing the cool jobs you might imagine. They aren't surgeons, bank directors, or high-tech engineers. They're laundromat owners, suppliers of kitchen equipment for restaurants, providers of farm supplies, fire suppression system installers, people quietly operating in niche markets that few pay attention to, but which are incredibly lucrative. And that's what this chapter aims to reveal. Wealth doesn't come from professional prestige. It comes from controlling your own market. We call this your niche market. Not a trendy niche, but a specific field, a particular need that you deeply understand, expertly serve, and effectively control. A place where you don't have to compete with thousands of people, don't have to chase trends, don't need to shout to get noticed, because you're in the right place at the right time with the right solution. A man I met in Pennsylvania is a vivid example. He owned a company specializing in supplying water pumps for dairy farms. No one dreams of doing that job from childhood. No one calls it a hot industry, but he understood this industry inside out. He knew which season people needed pump repairs, he knew the operating procedures, he knew what customers needed before they even spoke. He didn't get rich instantly, but he persevered, repeatedly expanding. 30 years later, he sold his company for $12 million, then returned to live on a small farm, raising horses and reading books every morning. He was never interviewed in the press. No one knew he was wealthy. But he is the type of millionaire this book seeks. someone who quietly dominates an underestimated market and leverages it to accumulate real wealth. Niche markets have three major advantages. 1. Low competition costs. 2. High customer loyalty. 3. Stable long-term profit margins. Those in large markets must fight daily to win every customer. Those in niche markets, if they perform well, will have customers seeking them out, referring them, and staying loyal. A couple in Atlanta whom we interviewed got rich by selling seat belts for heavy-duty trucks. It sounds mundane, but they did it exceptionally well. They understood every detail, sourced the right products, provided the correct service, kept their commitments, and year after year, achieved nearly 30% gross profit. They didn't change the world. They just served a small corner of it exceptionally well and let the market reward them with accumulated wealth. When you think of wealth, you might imagine rule breakers, innovators, market disruptors. But in the world of the millionaires next door, most truly wealthy individuals don't change much at all. They simply serve a specific need for a long enough time with an incredibly high level of efficiency. We once tracked a woman who ran an oil furnace maintenance service in the cold rural areas of Vermont, a field almost unknown in the city. She didn't have a grand office, no luxury car, no dazzling LinkedIn profile. But she owned 2 service trucks, employed 3 skilled technicians, and ran a business with a net profit of $400,000 annually. She lived in a small wooden house, cooked her own meals, and consistently invested in dividend-paying stocks. Her total net worth was nearly $5 million, all from a niche market so narrow it had no competition. Her secret? I chose a market that others scorned. Then I stayed with it long enough to become the best. That's the pattern we see repeated. While the majority rush into high-end, high-growth industries where competitors are as numerous as ants, the millionaires next door choose small, unglamorous, commonplace industries that have little competition, are easy to build trust in, and offer rich potential for accumulation. They don't need rapid growth, they need stable accumulation. And you know what the irony is? Precisely because they don't dream of getting rich quickly, they often get rich faster than most people who are constantly chasing shortcuts. You might think a niche market is small, but it's only small if you view it through the eyes of a consumer. If you view it through the eyes of a solution provider, you'll find a value chain that no one has fully exploited. Take the example of a discreet millionaire in Arizona. He ran a service cleaning industrial trash compactors for commercial buildings. Yes, you heard that right, trash compactors. It's something people avoid mentioning. But he saw a repeatable process there, a real need, and a gap in service quality. He didn't compete on price, he competed on professionalism, punctuality, polite staff, thorough odor elimination, photo reports after each cleaning. The first 3 years were tough. In the 4th, he started getting client referrals. By the 6th year, he had regular contracts with over 50 buildings, earning nearly $100,000 consistently each month. He didn't change the world, but his world completely changed. And this leads to a key principle. A niche market doesn't require you to be the best in the world. You just need to be the best in your small niche. The millionaires next door don't aim to be the richest on the Forbes list. They aim to have stable income, good profit margins, flexible time, and control over their own lives. They don't build castles in the sky, they build workshops on the ground. Then they gradually expand, innovate slowly, invest in systems, train personnel, and elevate service quality to a level no one else in that niche can rival. A niche market isn't as glamorous as high-tech, not as dynamic as startups, but it offers you something few other professions dare to promise: sustainability, accumulation potential, and high control. Remember, a niche market doesn't require you to be the most creative, the smartest, or the most highly educated. It just needs you to be patient, skilled in your craft, and to understand your customers better than anyone. We followed the journey of a second-generation immigrant who once worked as a manual laborer on construction sites. He discovered that many small contractors frequently lacked people for post-construction cleanup, a job no one fought over, no one paid attention to. He started taking small contracts, doing everything himself, then hired more people, bought a truck, invested in industrial vacuum cleaners, and then formed a company. 15 years later, he had nearly 40 employees, long-term contracts with major construction companies, and a net profit of over $1 million annually. He drove an old truck, ate homemade sandwiches, and invested nearly 60% of his income into rental properties. I asked him, "Did you ever feel like your work was beneath you?" He chuckled heartily. "People saw me sweeping, but I was sweeping a path to financial freedom." That answer resonated with me for years. It reminded me that true value isn't in the outward appearance of a job, but in how you transform that job into a system that creates long-term value. Niche market isn't limited by industry. It's only limited by your mindset. Many people never see opportunities because they're busy seeking validation. They choose jobs that sound impressive over jobs that are genuinely profitable. They choose hot industries instead of unmet needs. They choose to display instead of accumulate. Meanwhile, the millionaires next door choose efficiency. They don't need everyone to understand what they're doing. They just need their customers to understand the value they provide. And precisely because they don't need praise, they have enough time to innovate. Because they're not pressured to look successful, they have enough space to increase profits. Because they're not caught up in appearances, they dedicate all their energy to truly getting rich. Look around you. Every city, every town has overlooked needs, services that are done carelessly, dissatisfied customers. You don't need to invent something new, you just need to serve old needs better than anyone else. And that's where your niche market begins. Don't underestimate the small things. Production lines need replacement gears. Restaurants need specific-sized sinks. Seniors need rides to doctor's appointments. Offices need plant maintenance. All are markets. All can accumulate wealth. All can become the foundation of sustainable wealth if you choose to look at it through the eyes of a wealth builder rather than a seeker of glamour. And when you choose the right niche, persevere, innovate, keep your word, and serve so well that you become irreplaceable, you will step into a world most people never reach, the world of silent wealth. A place with no applause, no spotlight, no accolades, just you, a healthy balance sheet, and the freedom to master your own life. Asterisk Chapter 8, Millionaire Work and Heirs. If you rewind a few decades, you'll find a time when people believed choosing the right profession meant choosing your entire life. Doctors, lawyers, engineers, these were the aspirational pinnacles for parents. Children had to go to college, work for large corporations, earn high salaries, and steadily climb the career ladder. That was the path deemed stable. But when we studied thousands of self-made millionaires, those who built multi-million-dollar net worths without inheritance, a different truth emerged. Most of them didn't follow that path. They didn't work for others, they owned their own work. The first question we asked when we met them wasn't, "What do you do for a living?" but, "Who controls your income?" The answer was, they themselves. While the middle class strove to please their bosses, the millionaires next door strived to cultivate their own clientele. They worked not for praise, but to control a system that generated value and thus cash flow. Meet Day, a man who drove an old pickup truck running a small plumbing shop in suburban Detroit. He didn't have a college degree. His office was an old container placed behind his house. But he held maintenance contracts with over 100 households and 5 small businesses. He had 3 employees, no bank debt, and had been investing in index funds for over 20 years. His net worth was over $3 million. He didn't climb a salary ladder. He didn't apply for bonuses. He designed his work to fit the financial life he desired. And that's the key point. The millionaires next door choose work not for prestige, but for freedom and the potential for accumulation. They don't seek cool jobs, they seek jobs that offer leverage. The concept of leverage here isn't about borrowing to expand a business, but about time leverage, doing less over time while still generating higher value. It's asterisk system leverage, building something that operates even when they step away. And ownership leverage asterisk, something that can be transferred, sold, or inherited. Most millionaires in our study were small business owners. They weren't tycoons. They didn't run publicly listed companies. They were simply people who efficiently operated small business units with large profit margins. They sold safety equipment, provided office maintenance services, manufactured aluminum and glass doors, offered furnace repair services. It sounds mundane, but their gross profits were steady, and most importantly, they couldn't be fired. That's something many employees forget. You might earn $200,000 a year. But if the company closes its doors today, you lose everything. The millionaire next door, even if they only earn $100,000, controls their income streams. They create assets, rather than just consuming a monthly paycheck. There's a pattern we see repeated. Truly wealthy people don't work to get rich. They work to be masters of their work. The difference lies in purpose. Job seekers often ask, "What's the salary?" Millionaires ask, "What part of this system can I control?" Employees ask, "How long until I get promoted?" Millionaires ask, "How much repeatable value can I create for the market?" And most importantly, millionaires don't just think for themselves. They think about the system that can operate after they retire or leave the game. That's why this chapter isn't just about work, but also about heirs, because no one lives forever. The question isn't how much you earn, but whether the assets and work you build can continue without you. Many millionaires next door don't leave their companies to their children. Not because they don't love them, but because they know inheriting a business is never as important as inheriting a mindset. A man we interviewed, who ran a warehouse equipment supply company and had 3 children, didn't pressure his kids to follow in his footsteps. He said, "I built this business because I liked it. That doesn't mean my children have to like it. What I want to pass on is the way to build something from scratch." And that is the core of preparing heirs, not handing them a tree already bearing fruit, but teaching them how to cultivate a nation. The wealthy understand that wealth isn't sustained by kindness but by competence. A small business can generate millions, but if the successor doesn't understand the industry, doesn't know how to serve customers, and doesn't respect the processes, everything will collapse after just one bad financial report season. Therefore, millionaires next door tend to go in 2 directions. 1. Sell the business when they reach a certain age and use the proceeds to invest for lifelong financial security. 2. Keep the business as a cash flow generating tool but hire professional managers, without the expectation of passing it on to their children. Both approaches are based on a sober assumption. Your children are not obligated to love your work. I once asked a father who owned a long-standing chain of shoe repair shops why he didn't let his children take over. He said, "Because my children love teaching, and if I forced them to follow in my footsteps, I would not only kill their dreams, but also kill the integrity with which this business serves its customers." That answer left me silent for a long time. While many are preoccupied with building material legacies, the millionaires next door quietly build legacies of values. They let their children see discipline in their work. They tell them about mistakes and how to overcome them. They teach their children how to allocate income, how to fix a car, how to read expense reports. They don't give big gifts, they plant small seeds. And those seeds, if nurtured correctly, will sprout into a mindset of self-reliance, something no asset can replace. In the modern economy, where high salary is often seen as the sole criterion for choosing a profession, truly wealthy individuals have a different vision. They view work as a means to gain control over their lives, rather than a source of prestige. A man named Frank, who owned a company supplying lighting equipment for warehouses and manufacturing plants, once told me, "People ask me, 'Isn't that job boring?' I say, 'Boring. It lets me work 4 days a week, take holidays freely, drive my kids to school every morning, and invest steadily each month. That's enough joy right there." That statement was a gentle slap in the face to illusions about work needing to be passionate, creative, and innovative every hour. Frank didn't need innovation, he needed efficiency. He needed simplicity that could generate profit, and he had it. Yet, what impressed me wasn't his wealth, but how he passed on those values to his children. He didn't allow his children to join the company until they had worked elsewhere for at least 5 years. He didn't let them make any decisions without understanding cash flow. He never let his children take a management seat just because they shared his last name. "My children have to learn how to serve customers before they can make decisions for employees," he said. "Otherwise, they won't understand the essence of this business." The millionaires next door don't let work consume their lives, nor do they let it become a hollow launching pad for their children. They hold work in their hands like a tool, like a boat. They neither defy it nor dismiss it. They know their limits, and they teach their children those limits too. If you wish to leave assets to your children, remember that no financial gift is more valuable than the ability to control one's work and an ownership mindset. If you build a company, don't expect your children to love it as you do. Let them prove they can rise and sustain it themselves. If you are an employee, don't think you have nothing to pass on. The very way you manage your time, handle your salary, and accumulate assets is also a model of work that can be inherited. Because ultimately, work isn't just where you spend 8 hours a day. It's what shapes your finances, how you view life, and how you transmit the most important values in your family. And if you can build a job that you control, however small, however humble, however unimpressive to others, you have created a foundation stronger than any material asset. Freedom in thought and action, that is what can truly be passed on. And that is also what makes a millionaire who doesn't need anyone's recognition, only their own peace of mind when they look back. Perhaps if you have listened to the very last lines of this book, you haven't merely wanted to know what the rich do, but rather to understand how they think so they don't need to prove they are rich. Throughout the journey, deep into the world of self-made millionaires, individuals who live quietly behind the frosted glass of the real economy, one thing became clear. Wealth is not a destination, but the repeated consequence of deliberate, disciplined, and unostentatious decisions. And if there's anything most notable about them, it's not the money they earn, but how they reject the lifestyle that forces most people to spend every penny they have. I thank you for listening, not just with your ears, but with a quiet yet genuine curiosity. If this book holds any value, it's in its ability to reframe fundamental questions. Do you truly need to prove anything to others, or do you need a life driven by sobriety rather than the desire to show off? If you find anything in this book that makes you rethink how you spend money, where you live, or who you want to become, then perhaps we have met, not just through words, but now in understanding.